The building responded to Elise Whitmore before people did. Conversations softened when she stepped off her private elevator. Laughter died mid-breath. Phones lowered. Spines straightened as if an invisible hand had pressed down between shoulder blades. Even the air felt different around her, cooler, sharper, charged with consequence. Elise walked through the marble lobby of Whitmore Enterprises each morning like a sovereign surveying her kingdom, heels striking the floor with unhurried authority. She was young for someone who owned half the skyline, late 30s, immaculate, composed to the point of severity. Her tailored suits fit like armor. Her hair was always perfect. Her expression rarely changed. To most, she was a legend more than a person, the billionaire who built an empire without inheritance, without mercy, without apology. And she never wasted time pretending otherwise. Her gaze swept the lobby as it did every day, cataloging faces not by name but by usefulness. Executives nodded respectfully. Assistants scattered. Security guards stiffened. Then her eyes landed where they always did. Noah Carter had just walked in. He moved more carefully than the others, as if conserving energy he didn't have to spare. A messenger bag hung from one shoulder, worn at the seams. In one hand he carried a laptop case, in the other, the small, trusting hand of his daughter. The girl's backpack looked too big for her narrow frame, its straps patched where they'd frayed. She hummed quietly to herself, blissfully unaware of the weight pressing down on her father's shoulders. Elise stopped. It was subtle, just a fraction of a pause, but enough. People noticed when Elise Whitmore paused. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in assessment. Noah didn't look at her. He never did. He focused on guiding his daughter through the revolving door, murmuring something that made her smile. That smile lingered a beat too long in Elise's vision. Some people, Elise said, her voice cutting cleanly through the lobby, don't seem to understand where they belong. The words landed with surgical precision. Noah froze. The hum of the building filled the silence she left behind. He didn't turn around. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping once, before he squeezed his daughter's hand and guided her toward the elevator bank. The little girl looked up at him, confusion clouding her bright eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. "Did we do something wrong?" Noah bent slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "No, sweetheart. We're okay." Elise had already moved on, dismissing them with the same ease she dismissed failed proposals and underperforming executives. But she felt it then, a familiar, unwelcome tightening in her chest. Not guilt. Never that. Something sharper. Something closer to irritation. This ritual played out every morning. Noah's reports were too detailed. Then not detailed enough. He spent too much time mentoring junior engineers. He didn't delegate properly. His solutions were elegant but impractical. Practical but unimaginative. The reasons shifted, but the result was always the same: public correction, clipped tone, zero warmth. He accepted it all without protest. That was what infuriated her most. Noah Carter was good at his job, exceptionally so. His code was clean. His system stable. When something broke, he fixed it quietly, efficiently, without theatrics. He stayed late. He came in early. He never took credit he hadn't earned. And he was always tired. Elise noticed things others didn't. The faint shadows under his eyes. The way he skipped lunch more often than not. The careful way he folded receipts before slipping them into his wallet, as if every dollar mattered. She noticed the scuffed shoes, the fraying bag, the child's backpack repaired with care instead of replaced. Poverty had a smell to Elise. Not literal, something deeper. A posture. A vigilance. A way of moving through the world like it might take something from you if you weren't careful. She reacted to it instinctively, sharply, as if striking first could keep something buried. Sometimes she caught herself watching Noah longer than necessary. Her gaze lingered when he wasn't aware of it, studying the way he leaned over a keyboard, the way his shoulders sagged when he thought no one was looking. Once, she saw him laugh at something his daughter said over the phone, soft, unguarded, and her reaction was immediate and visceral. Anger. Cold and sudden. Joy like that didn't belong in her building. Yet she couldn't explain why him. Out of hundreds of employees, why did this one man draw her attention again and again? Why did his quiet resilience feel like a provocation? Why did the sight of his life, messy, fragile, human, set her teeth on edge? Elise told herself it was about standards. About professionalism. About discipline. But somewhere beneath the steel and glass and carefully constructed distance, another question pulsed, unanswered and dangerous. Why did breaking Noah Carter feel necessary? And why, despite her efforts, did he remain unbroken? The second time Elise Whitmore crossed Noah Carter's path that day, she did not plan to speak. She was in the executive corridor, glass walls, soundless floors, the kind of space designed to remind everyone who belonged there and who did not, when she saw him through the transparent conference room doors. Noah stood alone at the far end of the table, sleeves rolled to his forearms, explaining something to three senior architects twice his pay grade. He wasn't gesturing wildly or posturing. He spoke calmly, pointing to lines of code projected onto the wall, answering questions before they were fully formed. They were listening. That, more than anything, irritated her. Elise stopped walking. Her assistant slowed instinctively, then retreated when Elise lifted one finger without looking back. Through the glass, Noah nodded once, as if sealing an agreement. One of the architects, normally dismissive, arrogant, smiled in reluctant approval. Competence like that was dangerous. Quiet competence even more so. Elise stepped into the room without knocking. The temperature shifted instantly. Chairs scraped. Conversations cut off mid-syllable. Noah turned last. When he saw her, his expression didn't change much, just that subtle tightening around the eyes, like someone bracing for impact. "Am I interrupting?" Elise asked, though her tone made it clear the answer didn't matter. "No," Noah said. "We were just finishing." "Good." Her gaze flicked to the projection. "Because if this is the solution you're proposing, it's inefficient." Silence. One of the architects opened his mouth, then closed it again. Noah didn't flinch. He simply turned back to the screen, adjusted the display, and said evenly, "It reduces failure rates by 22% under peak load. And increases operating costs. Temporarily." Elise walked closer, heels echoing. "We don't do temporary inefficiencies here." Noah met her eyes. "For a heartbeat too long." "We do," he said quietly, "when they protect the system." The air went taut, stretched thin as wire. No one spoke. Elise felt something spark low in her chest, anger, yes, but threaded through it was something else. Recognition. The kind that made her uncomfortable. "Send me the full report," she said at last. "And next time, don't convene senior staff without executive clearance." "Yes, Ms. Whitmore." She turned to leave, then stopped. "And Mr. Carter," she added, without facing him. "This isn't a democracy. Remember that." When she walked out, she expected relief. Instead, the sensation followed her, tight, restless, unresolved. Later that afternoon, Elise sat alone in her office, the city spread beneath her like a map she owned. She tried to focus on acquisition numbers, on shareholder projections, on anything that made sense. But her mind kept circling back to the way Noah had looked at her. Not afraid. Not angry. Tired. It was the same look her father used to wear when he came home late, knuckles raw, shoulders bowed, not defeated, but carrying something heavy without complaint. Elise slammed her laptop shut. Enough. She stood and walked to the break room without telling herself why. Noah's daughter sat at the small table near the window, coloring carefully within the lines of a picture book. Her tongue peeked out in concentration. A lunchbox rested beside her, scratched and faded. The room was quiet. Too quiet. "This isn't appropriate," Elise said sharply. Noah turned, startled. "She's just finishing her homework. I'll take her home soon." "You said that yesterday." "And the day before," he said, not defensive, just factual. Her program was closed. Elisa's gaze flicked to the child, then away. "This is a Fortune 500 company, not a daycare." "I know." "Then act like it." Something hardened behind Noah's eyes. "With respect, she isn't hurting anyone. You're distracting people." "No," he said softly. "I'm distracting you." The words landed harder than a shout. Elise stared at him. For a moment, she thought she might fire him on the spot. The impulse was sharp, intoxicating. Power waited, ready. Instead, she said coldly, "Get your priorities straight." She turned to leave. She didn't see the child carefully tear a page from her sketchbook. Didn't see her fold it with deliberate care. Didn't hear her whisper, "Daddy, she looks lonely." That night, Elise dreamed of a house she hadn't thought about in years. Peeling paint. A kitchen table with one unsteady leg. A man counting coins into a cracked leather wallet, pretending not to notice the way his daughter watched him. She woke before dawn, heart racing, breath shallow. The next morning, the drawing appeared on her desk. A woman with a crown. Stiff posture. Sharp lines softened by bright, careless color. Beneath it, in uneven handwriting, "Thank you for letting my daddy work here." Elise stared at it for a long time. Too long. Something inside her shifted, not breaking yet, but fracturing. And for the first time since she built her empire, Elise Whitmore felt the faint, terrifying sensation that her control over one man might cost her control over herself. She folded the paper once. Then again. And slid it into her desk drawer, as if hiding it could stop what was already beginning. The third shift came quietly, so quietly Elise Whitmore almost missed it. It began with a sound she hadn't heard in years. Laughter. Not the sharp, polished kind exchanged in boardrooms or at charity galas, but something lighter, unguarded. It drifted down the corridor outside her office late one afternoon, thin but unmistakable. Elise looked up from her screen, irritation already tightening her jaw. Laughter during work hours was inefficient. Unprofessional. Unacceptable. She stood and followed the sound. It led her to the open workspace near the engineering wing, where Noah Carter sat at his desk, a phone balanced between shoulder and ear. His posture was relaxed in a way she had never seen, one elbow propped on the desk, his fingers absently spinning a pen. He was smiling. Actually smiling. "Yes," he said into the phone, voice low and warm. "I promise. Pancakes tomorrow. With extra chocolate chips." There was a pause. His smile widened. "Because you asked nicely." Elise stopped just out of sight. "Okay," Noah continued. "I love you too. Be good for Mrs. Patterson." He ended the call and exhaled, the smile lingering for half a second longer than necessary before fading as he straightened, slipping the phone into his pocket and returning to his screen. Something twisted inside Elisa's chest. She didn't step forward. She didn't speak. She turned and walked back to her office as if nothing had happened, but her pulse had quickened, and she hated herself for noticing. That evening, Elise stayed later than usual. The building emptied floor by floor, lights clicking off in distant offices, the hum of productivity replaced by a hollow quiet. She told herself she was catching up on work. She told herself she hadn't noticed Noah was still there too. But she noticed. He sat hunched over his keyboard, eyes red-rimmed with fatigue, fingers moving with relentless precision. At one point, he rubbed his face with both hands, lingering there as if bracing himself. Elise watched from behind the glass wall of her office, unseen. He didn't complain. Didn't pace. Didn't call for help. He just kept going. Her gaze drifted downward, catching on something resting beside his keyboard, a wallet. Old. Cracked. The leather was worn smooth at the edges, the fold barely holding together. Elise felt the color drain from her face. Her breath caught, sharp and involuntary. She knew that wallet. Not that exact one, but one just like it. Memory surged, unbidden and violent. A dim kitchen. The smell of cheap coffee. Her father's hands, rough and stained, opening a wallet that looked exactly like that one. Coins spilling onto the table. Bills smoothed and counted twice. His forced smile when he realized it still wouldn't be enough. "I'll figure it out," he'd said, every time. And every time, she believed him. Elise took a step back, as if the memory had reached out to touch her. The next morning, the office buzzed with the low murmur of gossip. Elise barely registered it until voices sharpened near the coffee machine outside her office. "Did you see Carter's wallet?" one man snickered. "Thing looks like it survived a war." Another laughed. "Guess that's what happens when you're raising a kid alone. Can't keep a wife, can't keep a budget." Elise stopped walking. Her hand tightened around the folder she was carrying. Slowly, deliberately, she turned. The men froze when they saw her. "Repeat that," Elise said softly. They swallowed. One stammered, we were just joking." "No," Elise said. "You were being cruel. There's a difference." Silence swallowed the space. "If I ever hear either of you discussing an employee's personal life again," she continued, her voice calm but lethal, "you will be escorted out of this building before lunch. Is that clear?" They nodded, pale, and fled. Only then did Elise realize her heart was pounding. Across the floor, Noah had witnessed everything. He stared at her, not with gratitude, not with relief, but with confusion. As if the ground beneath him had shifted, and he wasn't sure where to stand anymore. Elise met his gaze, and for once, she didn't look away immediately. Something passed between them. Unspoken. Dangerous. She turned and walked back to her office, her steps measured, controlled. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, pressing her palm flat to her chest. What had she just done? She had crossed a line she had drawn herself years ago. Defending him meant acknowledging him. Acknowledging him meant admitting the truth she'd been avoiding since the day she first saw him walk into her building with that child's hand in his. Noah Carter wasn't weak. He was surviving. And that terrified her more than incompetence ever could. That night, Elise opened her desk drawer and took out the drawing. She unfolded it carefully, smoothing the creases. The woman with the crown stared back at her, bright and unafraid. Elise whispered, so quietly the empty office barely heard it, "You don't know what kind of queen I am." But for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted to remain one. The night the building stopped breathing was the night Elise Whitmore finally lost control. It happened at 11:47 p.m., when the city outside her office windows glittered with careless life and the servers beneath her feet began to fail one by one. Red alerts flashed across her screen. Security notifications stacked faster than she could dismiss them. Financial systems lagged, then froze. Data pipelines choked. Somewhere deep in the building, a warning alarm pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Elise didn't swear. She didn't panic. Panic was for people who didn't own consequences. She stood, shrugging out of her blazer, sleeves rolled back with sharp, economical movements. "Lock down external access," she ordered into her phone. "Notify IT. I want live diagnostics in 60 seconds. There was a pause on the line. "Ms. Whitmore. Noah Carter is already on his way." Her jaw tightened. Of course he was. By the time Noah arrived, the building was nearly empty, lit only by emergency strips and the glow of monitors. He looked like he'd come straight from bed, hair still damp, jacket thrown on over a rumpled shirt. Exhaustion clung to him, heavy and unmistakable, but his eyes were clear. Focused. "Elise," he said, stopping short when he saw her in the server room. "No titles tonight?" she asked coolly. "Not if the system's bleeding out." She studied him for a beat, then stepped aside. "Show me." They worked in silence at first. Noah moved through the server room like someone who knew it intimately, hands steady, commands precise, voice low as he spoke into a headset, coordinating with remote teams. Elise watched him from across the room, arms crossed, her usual impatience dulled by something else. Respect, perhaps. Or the uneasy realization that she needed him. Minutes bled into hours. At some point, the tension between them shifted. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't warm. But it was no longer adversarial. They were two people standing against the same disaster, stripped of performance and hierarchy by the urgency of failure. At 1:30 a.m., Noah swayed. Just slightly. Barely enough to notice. Elise noticed. "When did you last eat?" she asked. He blinked, surprised by the question. "I don't remember." She didn't respond. She left the server room without explanation. 10 minutes later, she returned with a sandwich and a bottle of water from the executive lounge. She set them down beside him with deliberate care. "Eat," she said. "That's not a suggestion." Noah stared at the food like it might vanish. "Thank you." She turned away, pretending to check logs. Her hands trembled when she reached for her coffee. She cursed under her breath when it nearly spilled. "You're not okay," Noah said quietly. "I said I'm fine." "No," he replied, firmer now. "You said it." "That doesn't make it true." The word struck deeper than she expected. She spun to face him, eyes blazing. "Do you have any idea what's at stake right now?" "Yes," he said. "I live like this every day." Silence slammed down between them. The servers hummed. The building waited. Elise felt the pressure in her chest rise, hot and unfamiliar. "You think this is the same?" she demanded. "If this system fails, thousands of people lose their jobs. Investors pull out. Everything I built is at risk," Noah finished. "I know. But you're not the only one who carries weight." Her laugh was sharp, humorless. "You have no idea what I carry." "Then tell me." The words were soft. Dangerous. For a moment, Elise thought she might scream. Or fire him. Or walk out and never look back. Instead, something inside her cracked. "My father," she said abruptly, voice tight. "Worked 3 jobs. Still wasn't enough. Watched him be humiliated by people who thought money made them better. Watched him shrink." Noah didn't interrupt. "I swore I'd never be small," she continued. "Never powerless. Never dependent." Her breath hitched. She hated that more than anything. Noah nodded slowly. "You didn't become powerful," he said. "You became afraid." The words landed like a blow. Before she could stop herself, Elise closed the distance between them and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was sudden and fierce and desperate, like she was trying to prove something to herself more than to him. Noah froze, stunned, then pulled back just enough to look at her, eyes dark with disbelief. "What was that?" he asked. Elise stepped away, her face already hardening. "A mistake." She straightened her blouse, lifted her chin, and turned back to the servers. "Fix the system," she said coldly. "Then forget it happened." But even as she spoke, she knew the truth. Nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Mourning did not bring relief. It brought consequences. By the time dawn crept over the city, pale and indifferent, the server crisis was contained. Systems stabilized. Alerts faded to green. The building exhaled. Noah shut down the final terminal with hands that still weren't steady, not from exhaustion alone, but from the weight of everything that had not been said. Elise had not looked at him again. She stood near the window, back straight, arms folded, watching the city as if it had personally offended her. Her reflection in the glass looked untouched, perfect hair restored, blouse smoothed, composure rebuilt piece by piece. Only the faint tension in her shoulders betrayed the truth. "Systems are stable," Noah said at last. "I'll have a full report by noon." "Good," Elise replied. "You're dismissed." The word hit harder than he expected. He hesitated, then nodded. "Right." As he walked out of the server room, he waited, without knowing why, for her to stop him. To say his name. To acknowledge what had happened between them in the small, dangerous hours of the night. She didn't. By the time Noah reached the elevator, the kiss already felt unreal. Like something imagined by a man too tired to trust his own memory. But his mouth still remembered. By 10 a.m., the building buzzed with rumor. People noticed things. They always did. Elise Whitmore didn't stay overnight unless something catastrophic had occurred. Noah Carter didn't look like a man who'd slept at all. Their paths crossed in hallways and open spaces, and every time, conversation dipped, eyes tracked, speculation bloomed. Elise felt it like static against her skin. She chaired the emergency board call with ruthless efficiency, slicing through praise and panic alike. She outlined the failure, the fix, the prevention plan. She did not mention Noah by name. That omission was deliberate and noticed. After the call, she returned to her office and locked the door. Her hands shook as soon as she was alone. She pressed her palms flat against her desk, breathing through her nose, jaw clenched. The memory surged without warning, the heat of his mouth, the stunned stillness of him, the way he hadn't taken advantage, hadn't responded until she did. That was the worst part. She hadn't kissed him to dominate him. She'd kissed him because she was losing. Elise Whitmore did not lose control. She went to her desk drawer and opened it. The drawing stared back at her. She didn't remember putting it there. Only that it existed. Waiting. Judging. A woman with a crown drawn too large for her head, eyes sharp but lonely. "Damn you," Elise whispered, though she wasn't sure who she meant. Noah found her that afternoon. He hadn't planned to. In fact, he had avoided the executive floor all day, burying himself in work, keeping his head down. But at 3:42 p.m., he received a calendar invite that made his stomach drop. Private meeting, Elise Whitmore. No agenda. He stood outside her office longer than necessary before knocking. "Come in," she said. She didn't look up when he entered. "You wanted to see me," Noah said. "Yes." She finished typing, then closed her laptop with measured calm. "Last night never happened." He stiffened. "That's not." "I don't care what you think it was," Elise said sharply. "It was a lapse in judgment. Nothing more." Silence stretched. "You kissed me," Noah said. Not accusatory. Just factual. Her eyes snapped up, icy and furious. "And I said it was a mistake." "Was it?" he asked quietly. Her gaze burned into him. "Do you want to keep your job?" The question was a blade. Noah inhaled slowly. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but something had changed. "I've kept my job under worse than this," he said. "But I won't be threatened for acknowledging reality." Elise stood abruptly. "You don't get to redefine this." "I'm not," he replied. "You are." That was when it happened. The door opened. Two board members froze in the doorway, mid-conversation, eyes flicking between them. Elise stood rigid behind her desk. Noah stood too close. Too intense. Too unprofessional. The silence was deafening. Sorry, one of them stammered. Elise recovered instantly. Meeting's over, she said coolly. We'll reschedule. The door closed. But the damage was done. That evening, headlines didn't explode, but whispers did. Power dynamics. Favoritism. Impropriety. Elise felt the walls of her empire tremble, just slightly. And for the first time, the thing she feared wasn't exposure. It was Noah walking away. Because as she sat alone in her office long after dark, Elise Whitmore realized the truth she had avoided all day. She had spent years trying to break one man. And in a single moment of weakness, she had handed him the only power that had ever truly frightened her. Elise Whitmore did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark of her penthouse bedroom, city lights slicing through the glass walls like silent accusations, replaying every word, every look, every moment she had failed to control. By morning, she had already made 3 decisions, none of which felt like victory. At 6:12 a.m., she canceled her first meeting. At 6:18, she called legal. At 6:31, she stared at her reflection and finally admitted the truth. This wasn't about Noah Carter anymore. It was about the past she had spent a lifetime outrunning. By mid-morning, rumors had sharpened into something more dangerous. Elise felt it in the way conversations stopped when she passed, in the cautious looks exchanged behind glass walls. Power thrived on certainty, and for the first time, hers wavered. Noah avoided her. That, unexpectedly, hurt more than confrontation would have. She saw him once, only once, through the open floor of engineering. He stood with his team, calm, focused, doing what he always did, solving problems, protecting systems, shielding others from chaos. Someone laughed at something he said. He smiled politely, then turned back to work. He didn't look toward the executive wing. That afternoon, Elise made a decision she had sworn she never would. She asked him to stay late. The building was quiet again when Noah arrived at her office after hours. The city outside glowed amber and indifferent. Elise stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled back, no armor this time, only exhaustion. "You wanted to see me," Noah said. "Yes," she replied. "And before you ask, this isn't about last night." He waited. She noticed that now, he waited instead of reacting. It unnerved her. "I owe you something," Elise said finally. "The truth." Noah frowned slightly. "I didn't ask for." "I know," she cut in. "That's why I'm giving it." She turned to face him, and for the first time since he'd known her, there was no ice in her expression. Only tension. Raw and unpolished. "My father was a single parent," Elise said. "My mother left when I was 6. She didn't call. Didn't write. Just vanished." Noah said nothing. "He worked himself into the ground," she continued. "Brilliant man. Kind. Honest. And utterly invisible to people with money. I watched executives talk over him, mock him, replace him without a second thought. I watched him apologize for things that weren't his fault." Her voice tightened. "I learned early that dignity didn't protect you. Power did." She laughed quietly, without humor. "So I built it. Piece by piece. And I swore I'd never let anyone see weakness again." Noah's jaw clenched. He already knew where this was going. "When you walked into my building," Elise said, "with that child holding your hand, I hated you." The word hung heavy. "You reminded me of him," she said. "And I thought if I could break you, if I could make you small, then maybe it meant what happened to him wasn't inevitable. Maybe it meant it was his fault. Not the world's." Her breath shook. She didn't stop it. "But you didn't break," she whispered. "You endured. And every day you did, it felt like you were proving me wrong. Silence filled the office. Noah finally spoke. So all of this, he said slowly, was about punishing a ghost. Yes, Elise said. And punishing myself for surviving. Noah took a step closer, not aggressive, not forgiving. Just present. You hurt me, he said. You hurt my daughter. Whether you meant to or not. I know. I won't excuse it. I'm not asking you to. They stood there, the distance between them heavy with everything unspoken. Elise felt something loosen inside her chest, fear, maybe. Or the beginning of surrender. There's something you should know, Noah said quietly. She looked up, heart stuttering. I turned in my resignation this morning. The word struck like a physical blow. You, what? Elise whispered. I got an offer, he continued. Smaller company. Less money. More humanity. I accepted. Her vision blurred. Why didn't you tell me? He met her gaze, steady and unyielding. Because this place doesn't own me. And neither do you. Elise swallowed hard. For the first time in her life, power slipped cleanly through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Except one thing. She straightened, inhaled deeply, and made the most dangerous choice of her career. Then stay, Elise said. Not for me. Not for this company. He waited. Stay, she continued, voice shaking but resolute, so I can do this right. Publicly. Honestly. Even if it costs me everything. Noah studied her for a long moment. Suspense coiled tight between them. And for the first time, Elise Whitmore stood without a crown, waiting to see if she deserved anything more than the truth. The boardroom was full when Elise Whitmore walked in, and for the first time in her career, she did not feel taller than everyone else. She felt exposed. The city shimmered behind the glass walls, indifferent to the reckoning about to unfold. Board members sat rigid in their seats, legal counsel flanking them like sentries. Phones buzzed softly on the table, alerts, leaks, whispers already escaping into the world beyond this room. Elise stood at the head of the table, hands resting lightly on the polished surface, her posture perfect out of habit rather than confidence. Noah Carter sat near the far end. He hadn't planned to be there. She had insisted. He looked the same as always, tired, composed, quietly resolute, but something about him had shifted. A calm finality hovered around him, as if he had already stepped beyond this moment and was simply seeing it through. Elise met his eyes once. Just once. Then she began. There has been a breach, she said, voice steady. Not of data. Of conduct. A murmur rippled through the room. For years, she continued, I cultivated a culture of excellence through fear. I told myself it was necessary. Efficient. I told myself cruelty was leadership. She paused. Every instinct screamed at her to stop. To pivot. To spin. She didn't. I abused my authority, Elise said. Specifically toward an employee who did nothing to deserve it. All eyes shifted to Noah. He didn't flinch. I allowed my personal history to dictate my behavior. I created a hostile work environment. And I failed, repeatedly, to correct it. The room was silent now. Elise drew in a breath that felt like glass in her lungs. Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO pending an independent review. I will cooperate fully. Whatever the outcome. Shock broke through at last. Voices rose. Someone stood. Another swore under their breath. Elise didn't move. She felt strangely light. As if the crown she had worn for decades had finally been lifted, and the weight she'd mistaken for power had been crushing her all along. The meeting ended in chaos. But Noah stayed seated. When the room finally emptied, Elise turned toward him, her composure unraveling now that there was no audience left to impress. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "I did." He studied her, not with awe, not with anger. With something closer to sorrow. "You're giving up everything," he said. She nodded. "I know. And you still might lose me." "I know." Silence settled between them, thick and honest. Noah stood. "I meant what I said," he told her. "About leaving." "I know. But," he continued, "I also meant what I said about doing things right." Her heart thudded painfully. "I won't stay because you asked," he said. "And I won't stay because you kissed me." Color rose faintly to her cheeks. "I'll stay," Noah said, "if this place becomes somewhere my daughter could walk into without being afraid." Elisa's breath hitched. "I can't promise perfection," she said. "Only change." He nodded once. "That's enough to start." Weeks later, the headlines told a different story than anyone expected. Not just a billionaire stepping down, but a public apology. Policy overhauls. Transparent accountability. Elise Whitmore didn't disappear. She stayed. She faced the fallout. She listened when it hurt. She learned when it humbled her. And Noah? He stayed too. Not because the building belonged to her anymore, but because it was becoming something neither of them had believed possible. On a quiet morning months later, Elise stood in the lobby again. The marble floors gleamed as they always had, but the atmosphere was different. Softer. Human. Noah walked in with his daughter's hand in his. This time, Elise didn't speak. She knelt. "Good morning," she said gently to the girl. The child smiled. "Daddy says you're not the boss anymore." Elise smiled back. "No," she said. "I'm just someone who's learning." The girl considered that, then nodded solemnly. "That's okay. Grown-ups are slow." Noah laughed, really laughed. Elise joined him. And in that moment, surrounded by glass and light and the quiet hum of a building no longer ruled by fear, everything truly changed. Not because of power reclaimed. But because, at last, it had been surrendered.